Welcome to Training Unleashed, the show that will help you design and deliver training that's off the chain and will make a difference. Now, here's your host, Evan Hackle.
Welcome to another edition of Training Unleashed. Today, we are very fortunate to have with us a great guest, Tom Kiernan. So why don't you give us a little bit about yourself and Aslan and what you guys do? And I know it's pretty unique and pretty clever. So,
yeah, today I like to consider I work with one of the best training organizations in the world. We're selling power top 20 organization, and we help customers from Fortune 500 to small to medium-sized business bridge the gap in sales and customer service execution. Our programs focus on building and enhancing competency in sales and customer service and customer satisfaction, and we do this by providing enablement processes to create and drive coaching culture. So ultimately, we like to think that we drive employee engagement. So I got to Aslan by way of building global learning and enablement processes and teams for industry-leading companies in the energy management field, IT industry, retail, and insurance. So I've kind of been all over the place there. I also have a background in sales. I've sold life annuities, backup batteries, which makes for some really cool cocktail conversation, and I've even sold thin air back in the dot-com age. So it's been a fun ride. It's been very interesting for sure.
So as you know, one of the premises of this podcast is that most companies, I'll put this nicely, don't fully take advantage of the opportunities that training can have to improve their companies. Some don't train, some train but don't invest properly. Maybe, you work with some of the top companies that are obviously making a big investment in training and improvement. Maybe talk about, what you actually can measure, see, and know the impact that you guys are actually making.
Well, I think, Evan, what we first do, talk a little bit about kind of what we do differently. Because that really leads to how we measure. And I think what we do is we focus on receptivity of the customer. And you think, focusing on that, it would be certainly a very difficult thing to measure. How would you ever measure whether or not your employees, your customer-facing employees are focused on receptivity? So, I think what a lot of folks out there is they're used to their sales employees, their customer-facing employees. They have self-centered motives, and receptivity is really about is really about focusing on what's on that customer's mindset. So do you have a garden, Evan?
Yes, a flower garden, not
a flower. Okay, so if you had a vegetable garden, you might go out and you might buy some seeds. What kind of vegetables would you buy if you had some? A vegetable?
When I was a kid, we gardened for cucumbers, pickles, zucchini, asparagus, and tomatoes.
Outstanding. So you'd go out and you'd get these seeds. So if you think about receptivity, and you think about that soil that you're going to plant the seed, and think about soil as that customer's mindset.
Yeah.
And then you think about you think about that seed being, what a lot of our customers, a lot of what we're seeing out there is that customer wants to create that perfect pitch that perfect seed to plant into that soil. What we don't understand is whether or not that soil is actually fertile. If that customer's mind, if you think about that customer mind being that fertility, is whether or not that customer is receptive. So we say that the key to understanding receptivity and gaining receptivity is by teaching these people that face the customer to be other-centered. And we think that being other-centered, and so much so that we trademark other-centered around our programs, other-centered selling and leadership, creating loyal customers. But we believe that really driving that other-centered behavior in an organization can actually lead to a marked engagement and a marked improvement in not only enablement but engagement in that company.
Training Unleashed is brought to you by Tortal Training, specializing in e-learning and interactive online training solutions for corporate, government, nonprofit, and franchise organizations. Tortal makes effective training easier. Just go to tortal.net to gain access to real-world tools that can make a difference. That's tortal.net, Tortal, tortal.net.
I'm actually going to ask you a question that may not seem like it follows well to what you just said, but I do think it does. One of the biggest problems that I see in training is that people that are involved in training that work for corporations, they don't sell well. They don't sell up to management well. They don't sell into their, and say this, somewhat nicely, that, when they put on training, they expect that everyone's going to come, yay, I'm happy I'm being trained today. And they don't put on the hat of, wow, here's a person super busy. They're going to spend time training. The training may be excellent training, but that doesn't take away from the fact they still have a job to do. And when they're selling up to management in terms of getting the funding and support and all of those things, they don't feel like, hey, I'm part of the company, I don't need to sell. And I think that one of the key things of every training department is that sort of to what you're saying is they have to think about the other. They have to think about the trainee who's in their training. They have to think about the management people they need to get buy-in. So, and I know that your company is a training company, but because a lot of people listening here are as part of training departments, maybe you could take and apply some of your knowledge to them to help them get greater support within training in their own organizations.
It's, I like to say, training country in the enablement world, right? Training is an important part of the enablement process, and an enablement process can support many different processes, whether it's sales, product development, marketing, right, across core processes in an organization. And I think that it's a mindset that has been changing for many years now, where we're moving from this learning and development thought process to learning and enablement. And I think training is a critical foundation to enablement. But I think training departments and I think training organizations have to be thinking about things like engagement as the end game and the measurement of engagement, and how they're learning, how learning can impact things like engagement that are so important today to companies. So I think if training organizations can begin to think about becoming more of curators of content, right? Putting the right content at the right time, at the right place for the right customer in the right process. I think that really is going to help them with understanding better on how they're supporting their organization, and having a better discussion at that C level with respect to how people are learning today, right? Our customers today, yeah. Evan, they learn. Our customers, out in the customer world. How do they learn today? They're learning on their own. They're learning through the World Wide Web. They're learning through social learning, right? So a majority of the learning that's happening today, and this is one of the things that Aslan has done and Aslan has adapted to, is to the fact that information is so readily available to our customers, right? And so much so it is inside of organizations as well, to employees. It's there, but how do we know and how can we track what's happening when they're learning on their own, when they're learning through social forums like blogs and discussion forums, and through things like Facebook and LinkedIn, and how well do we put these types of learning environments in front of our employees, and are we setting them up for success to really be engaged in the learning process? So I think that's a long way to say to you that when we think, okay, training is event, training happens, and okay, great, but how are we reinforcing it? What are we doing to make it so that employees can be on a continuous journey of learning?
Can you just tell me a little bit about your process of how you start the interaction with your client, how you learn and assess what they need, and how you position yourself so that you're leaning into your client and you're thinking about, thinking from your client's perspective?
We've really focused when we speak to organizations in the decision-making realm, we really focus on that executive level for HR, typically HR and sales. And, we really believe that if we're going to be successful inside of companies, we really need to be at that level to get that buy-in for investment. And, our process is very much about the enablement programs and training programs that help companies to become more efficient, more effective, not only in sales process, customer service process, customer loyalty process, but also in leadership and driving leadership. And that's where I think organizations become very, very successful, is when they engage in that reinforcement and start to create coaching cultures. So that when we get engaged with companies, we're really focused on making sure that it's a top-down approach, and that essentially when we go in, we really focus then from the bottom floor up to drive our programs and our organization throughout the process.
And how do you guys measure results?
We like to we love to start with really benchmarking together with the organization where they are from a competency standpoint. So we work very closely with the management teams with very thorough process around benchmarking competency, and we really also like to focus on what their business goals are, and so driving competency towards their business goals is a critical component of our measurement. So we have proprietary software that helps us to engage in and look at various roles within the organization, and helps us to benchmark where they are from a competency standpoint, and then build a coaching process around that to be able to, through a dashboard, see where teams, individuals are going with respect to the competencies that we teach in our program.
So that's very interesting. So what you're really doing is you're creating a baseline, and then you're measuring improvements in competencies.
Yeah, very much so. And the competencies that we're looking at, are we've found to be proven as far as the skills and competencies that we drive into organizations. We've found to have been very much tied to the success of the business, particularly those business objectives. It's without a doubt, it's about driving that competency. It's and measuring it, and it's in coaching. It's really one step at a time, right? You go out onto the golf range and you try to teach somebody how to become a better golfer. You really you don't pick up the driver and then 2 seconds later pick up the mid iron and then move over the putting green. You really focus. We try to focus one competency at a time. We try to establish a coaching process that is focused on one competency at a time to help move that needle ahead. It's not a fast process, right? It's an investment, and I think that goes back to our assessment. Is the organization ready to invest to see real return on investment? And that's something we try to engage right from the beginning, and why we really like to talk to the highest level of an organization.
And it sounds like you do a lot of individual work, because you've used the word coaching a lot. So as opposed to one system for everyone, you're kind of customizing and dealing with each individual person based on their competency weaknesses to bring them up.
Yeah, we have a methodology for teaching coaching, right? So we bring management teams in and not only teach them methodology for how to coach, but also the methodology and the process, the consultative process that we teach to their sales and customer facing teams. And so
you're training in essence, management on how to coach their sales team.
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, we are absolutely coaching the team to coaching the sales teams, the customer facing teams. It could be call center, inside sales. It's we go across multiple sales organizations, customer service organizations to teach management a methodology for coaching, as well as the methodology that we teach to their teams and to their salespeople.
We're so glad you're listening to this episode of Training Unleashed, brought to you by Tortal Training. The difference between Tortal Training and other online training companies is we're primarily a training company with technology, rather than a technology company that does training. Want to find out more? Just go to tortal.net. That's Tortal, tortal.net.
Let's just take this first example. You met with a company. You go in. You're working with the HR. You're working with with the real decision makers. They make this investment. You go in. You train. You do this, and then 5 years later, you come back. Do they work with you continuously thereafter with new hires? What happens? I assume some companies are better than others. What happens in time?
In time, the best companies and certainly our most loyal customers are the ones that stick with us through time, and we have a lot of those. Though obviously, like any other business, they drive our business, right? Some companies will over time will invest in and we will teach their employees and their people that have the competency to drive their own coaching, their own sales training using our program. So we will, with many companies, a lot of Fortune 500 companies that we work with, we'll actually hand the Aslan keys to them through a very rigorous process. So a lot of time when you talk about 3, 4, 5 years, a lot of our customers are taking our stuff they're running with it, and using our stuff on a licensing, our content on a licensing basis. Other companies that we've had a lot of repeat companies who come out, who have used us in the past and then kind of drop it, and they say, "Gosh, if we only stuck with it." And they do, and they certainly do come back and say, we want to do it. We just a company down in South Carolina, we just did the same thing with. 10 years later, they came back and said, if we only had stuck with what you had prescribed for us, I think we would have been much better off. Let's do it this time. So we run into that as well, but for the most part, the most successful companies are the people that stick with us and continue and eventually kind of, end up running on their own with it.
Do you, and this is probably an unfair question to ask you without anything, so you could say, I don't know. But do you have any, statistics or things in terms of retention of salespeople, improvement, not just in competencies, but, improvement in sales, because what I'm hearing is, what you would do is going to make salespeople more successful, should make them more money, should make them happier to work there, that they would stay longer, turnover would be down, and sales would be up. That's my assumption. Do you have any, analytical, anecdotal or hard data? Have you, looked into that in terms of the impact that you typically have?
Yeah, we have a number of success stories with customers again, and I think a lot of it goes back to the benchmarking and setting a bench when we come in, and then 6 months later, a year later, I can speak to it from my own experience. I was in training management for a company called APC. We didn't really have a process for training our call center and inside sales, so we called upon about 15 years ago a company called Aslan Training and Development, and brought them in and really stuck with their process over 2 or 3 years and saw increase in sales in our call center. I could throw percentages out there. I'd be making them up, but they were, wildly successful for us. And I think through the coaching process, we saw certainly, higher levels of retention and engagement as well. But clearly documented was success from a revenue standpoint, from the time we brought people, from the time we brought Aslan in to the time that we started to take it on ourselves. It was an extremely successful process. So that was 12, 15 years ago. I since joined the company 2 years ago. So I've had a long-standing relationship with Aslan before I even joined.
Well, it is kind of interesting, and certainly a testimonial to Aslan that, here you hired them, you were a client, and then eventually you went to work for them. So you're clearly a believer, and philosophically, everything that you say, I think, makes so much sense. I love how you are looking at the individual more than you're looking at putting everyone in the same category. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes people have, is that they treat groups of people, and then you have performers that are underwhelmed because they're being treated at the middle quartile, and then you have underperformers that are overwhelmed because they're not at the speed that the learning really works for. And to be able to look at everyone at where they are and what they need, it's almost like just-in-time learning, so to speak. I think is a fantastic idea and methodology. I know in our pre-call briefing we talked about that what you were going to describe is kind of hard for people to see, and that you'd be happy to give people a demo and let them see what you have available. Do you want to talk a little bit about that demo and that offer?
Sure. We have some amazing proprietary software and it's technology, Evan, right? So process and establishing a process, enabling process for, creating other-centered leadership and customer-facing salespeople. But our software helps to create a dashboard to drive and track competency of your organization and the teams that we train together. It's extremely easy to use, and it essentially it's we're helping you show return on investment not only for the other center programs that Aslan brings to you, but also how it really can impact employee engagement, right? Which I think is such a huge part of, again, going back to that C-level discussion, right? That's what they're talking about today. How do we get these employees to be more engaged? Because engagement today means more productivity, more profitability, more employee retention, right?
Sure.
And I don't think saying thank you and recognition process is enough. I think you have to really focus on enablement, enabling processes. I think Aslan is one of the best when it comes to enabling sales process, and I think measuring it is really an important piece of it.
So, Tom, we need to wrap up, but if you could share one training tip, what would that be?
Well, I think it would be, I talked about, can you drive other-centered mindset into your organization? If you can, I think it'll enhance I think it'll absolutely enhance your employee engagement. Look at the Gallup 12 questions. Look at them, study them. There's 12 of them. It's very simple. And if your training, if your enablement isn't driving 10 out of those 12 questions, then I think you need to really look at either getting help or redefining your strategy. I love the question, Evan. Do I have a best friend at work? Gallup question number 10. Do I have a best friend at work? And it's well, for me in my home office, it's my Great White Pyrenees Juliet. I don't know if that counts, but. And that's an engagement, right? That's an engagement question. It's one of the top 12. But I promise you, if you do have a best friend at work, it started with their decision to put your needs first.
Wow, very interesting thought. Well, Tom, we are out of time, but I want to thank you very, very much for your insight and thoughts. And I like the approach that you have, and appreciate you taking the time very, very much.
It's a great pleasure to be here, and thanks for having me, Evan. I appreciate it.
This has been Training Unleashed, but it doesn't stop here. Just go to trainingunleashed.net to subscribe to the show. That way, you'll never miss an episode, and you'll be well on your way to delivering training programs that are off the chain. We'll talk to you next time on Training Unleashed.